Welcome to my Storybook Dollhouse. We're going to talk about the roof, and as you can see in this image, I've stripped off all the shingles. Now here's a before and after, so it'll give you an idea of where we're going. I wanted the roof of this whimsical dollhouse to take on the look of a thatched roof. I wanted to use wood shingles to create the look. And the one thing I knew the thatch roof had was it looked as if it had rounded edges. How did I do that? I used tinfoil. I rolled up tinfoil really tight, glued it on to the underside of the eave, secured it really well, wrapping around the corners, and mounted a little extra tinfoil padding just on the very peak of the roof because I wanted it to have a little bit of an upturn. Once this was done, I then started layering the shingles in place, starting at the bottom and working towards the top. These are packed in really tightly. The shingles are all different sizes. I broke the existing shingles that I replaced, turned them over, and utilized those ones. You can see how tightly packed they are, and I just randomly glued them in place. I used hot glue to secure them, and then I used a good wood glue that I poured in from the top of each shingle. I squeezed it in with the mouth of the glue bottle. There are hundreds of shingles, maybe even thousands, that I used to cover all the areas, even around the domed roof. You have to be careful when applying the shingles as you round out over the tinfoil that they're secured really well with glue. Along the front of the dollhouse, I kept all the shingles flat and in a straight line. You can see in this image, I also put in little pieces of birch bark just for added interest. Now, as I was doing this, I realized that the lower roof on this particular dollhouse had a straight edge, and it needed to look almost like a camel's back. That is what gave me the idea to build this up. I used just plain cereal box cardboard. I stuffed tinfoil underneath it to hold it in place, glued it securely, and then started putting on the shingles, layering the shingles, building up as I went, tucking them in between each other, and as long as they all headed in the right direction, I knew I was going to be safe. I did this on both sides of the house. You can see the humps, the two humps, and these were very secure with the amount of glue that I used. I think I went through 2 full bottles of glue. I did the same on the dome and on each side of the roof, being sure to follow the direction of the roof grade. So if that portion of the roof went in a particular direction, I followed that with the shingles. It got a little tricky where I came to like the corners. I had to think of it like a fan or piece of pie, that these shingles would be put in place, and I could always go back later on and tuck extra ones in just to fill in the spaces in between. And you can see that here in this example. I went back and I just tucked little bits and pieces. Some of the slivers were even as small as a 1/4 inch. Then when I got to the very top of the roof line, of course they were both meeting, one on either side, I then followed along in a different direction, but still following that line of the roof. Here you can see that the shingles look like they're all different colors, and they were. I ended up reusing what came off of the house, plus 2.5 bags of additional shingles that I just cut in random pieces. Yes, it took a lot of shingles, but I just love the effect. And if I had a dime for every person that said they loved it, I'd be a rich lady today. Along the edge of the lower roof, I kept that straight, but on the upper roof, I really made sure that the shingles wrapped completely around the eave for a rounded look. Where the roof met the walls of the house, I also cut slivers of shingles and glued them on horizontally so I would have a nice, neat, tidy edge. Where you can see the arrows is where that took place. Little bits of birch bark tucked in between also added to that whimsical look. Here you can see where the roof peak built up and mounded and really gives it an authentic thatched look. Bits and pieces of moss were tucked in between. Great distraction, great cover-up, camouflage, but also adds a lot of interest and authenticity. When the roof was completed, I stained the entire roof with a good acrylic stain that I mixed up myself using a sealer and a little bit of transparent acrylic pigments that I had. So I got a sort of a light burnt sienna color, and I applied this over the entire roof, one coat, so that all the shingles took on the same hue. And when it was bone dry, I then sealed everything using an old bushy paintbrush and a matte acrylic sealer. This took a little while to do, but it worked out really well. And on top of the domed roof, I put a wonderful old gentlemanly owl that I found at a thrift store. I thought he would just created a wonderful mascot for this house. So there's the roof, and I put little tiny fairy lights on the top of it. I tucked my battery pack under some moss, and at night it just looks beautiful. It looks like stars on top of the house. The edges of the lower roof, I did round out the sides, but I kept the front edge looking rather organic and in a straight line. Doesn't wrap underneath, but they are fairly rough edges, which gives it a more authentic, natural look. The addition of the moss here and there did tie the whole roof together and it helped unify it with the actual house. And there's the finished roof on top of my Storybook dollhouse. I was just so tickled pink with the outcome. And on the little back porch that sits under that lower roof, I create just different seasonal displays. There's an image showing the humps and how tightly they sit up against the house. Hard to believe, this was the before and this is the after. So with a little bit of creativity, a lot of patience, a couple of burned fingers because I did use a glue gun and a good wood glue. So the inside of the house was completely redone in white, and you can see the inside how I did that. Here I'm showing how I dust this roof, and I use a big fat mop brush, works wonderfully to dust. The before and after, and I'll give you a quick peek into the finished decorated house. There we are in a vintage style, no electricity. I wanted it to take on a country farmhouse cottage feel. probably late 17th century, and the furniture shows it. So there's my completed storybook dollhouse. Catch you later.